Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. Trevor, Sikkema, Dalton, Wasserman here with you guys. Do a little previewing. Today we're previewing the Senior Bowl, one of our favorite events that we have all year long. Dalton, how you doing, my friend?
Fantastic. Look, just like the Shrine Bowl was, it's going to be another group of guys that I'm really, really excited to see. And I think the theme is going to be a lot of guys who are going to see their stock either rise or drop heavily because we have so many guys kind of on that tweener range. Are they day 2 picks? Are they first-round picks? Are they lower than that? I think this is going to be a very big stock up, stock down week in Mobile.
No, there's no doubt about it. It feels like it's a very big sorting out week just in general. You mentioned there's some players that everybody kind of loves at the top of this draft class, but then, man, I don't know, pick 50 to pick 125. I don't want to say that they're exactly interchangeable, but there's not a ton of difference there in this class compared to others. It means that, different draft analysts that you listen to are going to have different flavors of rankings, and we know that that also means that teams are going to feel the same way. So maybe even a little bit less of a stock up, stock down, like who's rising, who's falling. Maybe it's more of, okay, this player might not be a totally complete player. He's going to be a stud no matter where he goes. Maybe more streamlined. I think that we're learning more in the middle of this week. I feel like we're learning more about guys who might be like, okay, this is a great fit for this team or this type of scheme on offense or defense, one way or the other. And I think the Senior Bowl, we got a lot of really talented football players, but we're going to be able to see their specializations, where they need to go in that regard. Just like we did for the Shrine Bowl preview, we'll go down the list of every single position. I'll list off the players that we have as it stands right now that are going to participate at the event, and then Dalton and I are going to give you one or two guys from each that we're most excited to see. Not necessarily the best, but that we're most excited to see for one way or the other. We'll start with the quarterback position, as we often do. Always gets the headlines. Tyler Show, is the first guy that we have here for the quarterback room in Mobile. Then it's Riley Leonard from Notre Dame, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon, Jackson Dart from Ole Miss, Jalen Milroe from Alabama, Seth Hannigan from Memphis, and then Taylor Elgzerma, I think that's how you say it. Taylor Elgzerma from Laurier, the man who won the Canadian Heisman, if you will. I think he's going to be there, and it's going to be fun to see him there. Kind of like it was with Tyson Bagent, right? When Tyson Bagent went to the Senior Bowl, nobody really knew who he was. Maybe Elgzerma is going to be another player in that regard. So, hey, who are you looking forward to most from this quarterback position? Maybe it's Elgzerma, maybe it's somebody else. Who you got on your list?
I think it's arguably the most polarizing prospect of the whole group, and that's Jalen Milroe, right? And I think you have a case of we know exactly what he can do, and we know exactly what we're not sure he can do, right? And I think the two things that stick out, he's got a big-time arm, and he's a dynamic runner, right? He's got physical tools better than maybe any quarterback in this draft. A 7% big-time throw rate as a starter over the last 2 years, 88.8 rushing grade, one of the elite runners at the position in college football. But when you watch him play in a lot of his games, especially a lot of the bigger games, can he handle the blitz? Can he tighten his footwork in the pocket? And he's just generally not all that accurate. There's a lot of balls, especially that get airmailed high. So I think he really, more than any of these other guys, needs to prove he can come to the Senior Bowl in this sort of controlled environment and do the little things in structure. His footwork in the pocket has to be better. His accuracy has to be better, because if he comes out and he's airmailing a bunch of balls, he's just going to be looked like, as an athlete, maybe just a day 3 pick who needs a ton of work and maybe even 2 or 3 years behind the scenes to get better. But he has to prove, if he can come out and his footwork is better and he's a little bit more accurate, there are going to be scouts that look at him as possibly a first-round type of talent, right? Because you can see the physical tools week in and week out. Personally, I don't think that. I think the only time this year where he looked like a first-round NFL quarterback was in the first half of the Georgia game, and otherwise it was kind of same old Milroe, where he's a home run hitter, but there's a lot of strikeouts in between, right? I think Milroe, this is the biggest week of the entire process for him, just to prove in a controlled team environment that he can come out and do the fundamental things as a passer.
It's no hyperbole to say that there's literally millions on the line for Jalen Milroe, because we've already sort of seen the rumors out there like, oh, this team is enamored with Jalen Milroe. And let me tell you, the margin between Malik Willis and Anthony Richardson of getting drafted in the top 8 or getting drafted in the 3rd round for Jalen Milroe specifically is razor thin. I mean, it could go, it's so polarized. Jalen Milroe is so polarizing that type of analysis swings almost throw to throw, it seems, with Jalen Milroe, because there's so much that you love that you just want to have that faith to just buy in a little bit. But then there's a lot of inconsistencies that, like you said, you've seen over the last 2 years. So if he can come into a new environment, wide receivers that he hasn't thrown to before, coaches that have not coached him yet, and look pretty damn consistent, you better believe that we're going to start talking about and hearing that teams like Jalen Milroe, not just in the first round, but as QB3 for a desperate quarterback needy team in the top 10. I genuinely think that's sort of what's at stake here. Not that I want to put too much pressure on the young man's plate, but unfortunately, that's just kind of where it is with Jalen Milroe because of everything he brings to the table. I think Jackson Dart from Ole Miss also has a lot to gain. Another very polarizing player. Maybe they're not the most polarizing ahead of Milroe, but you look at Jackson Dart, and he's somebody who's had that multi-sport background from when he was growing up. He's a very natural athlete, likes to be a runner, likes to escape the pocket, but he also likes to, throw deep down the field from within the pocket. He likes to operate the pocket pretty well, and he's confident in that within Lane Kiffin's system. I think the last part of that sentence is the one that you really have to think about. What is he like outside of Lane Kiffin's system? Because he had the fourth most big-time throws in the FBS this past year, and he's not a guy who's shy to throw it deep down the field. I think he's got all the arm talent to be able to do it. But even just for an example, on the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, Connor Rogers, my co-host, had him in his top 5 of quarterbacks. I didn't even have him in my top 10. So just very different opinions on what you believe Jackson Dart is outside of Ole Miss's offense. And I think that, again, new environment, that's a big reason why we love these events, because it's new stuff for these guys that it's not necessarily tailored to exactly what they want to do. And sometimes that's going to be the NFL, right? Sometimes you get drafted to a team and it's not exactly tailored to the way that you want it to be. And you got to be able to adjust, and you got to be able to showcase your talents no matter where you land. So I think that Jackson Dart is also somebody that has a lot on the line here from the quarterback position. Moving on to running back. Now, it's a stacked running back class in the 2025 NFL draft overall. And I think there's a lot of running backs to get excited about here in Mobile. R.J. Harvey from UCF, Bashal Tutin from Virginia Tech, Khalil Mullings from Michigan, Jarquez Hunter from Auburn, Donovan Edwards from Michigan, Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State, Devin Neal from Kansas, Jaquavius Woody Marks from USC, Brashard Smith from SMU, Damian Martinez from Florida, Marcus Yarns from Delaware, LaQuinton Allen Jr. from Syracuse, and then Trevor Etienne from Georgia. Who you got your eye on in this group, Dalton?
I think, was Cam Scattaboo not mentioned in that list also, or no?
No, so Cam was originally going to be in Mobile, but as far as I know now, that he is not participating now. So long season for Cam, understandable, had an incredible season, but he was initially going to be there, but I think just the wear and tear of the season probably keeps him out of those practices in Mobile.
He certainly put in a lot of work this year, especially during the Arizona State, especially in that playoff game, the last game against Texas. But I'll say, I'll say R.J. Harvey from UCF. He had a really productive year. I think quietly he was one of the best backs in the country. He's got electric feet out in space, and I think that's really what's going to be a dynamic piece that teams are going to look at in this draft. And I'm curious to see especially how he catches the ball. If he can prove himself as a receiver, because UCF, one of the most run-heavy offenses in the country this season, if he can prove that he can catch the ball out in space and do the same things, making guys miss out in space as he does in the run game, I think R.J. Harvey could see his stock move up a lot. And, you've mentioned it before. This is a talented group of running backs within this Senior Bowl group, and just the entire class, just amazing talents when you think about at the top with Ashton Jeanty and Scattaboo and Amarion Hampton. But I think especially there's guys who are going to go in rounds 2 through 5 in this class, and I think R.J. Harvey could be one of them that teams are going to get a steal on. And if you wanted even to, as a comp, somebody, I don't know if he would have the same impact as Bucky Irving, but I kind of feel the same way where I'm like, he just gets out there and he makes guys miss, right? And I think he's got electric feet. I think he's a guy, when you get into some of these one-on-one tackling drills, when you get into 7-on-7 and seeing if he can catch the ball, I think Harvey could prove a lot in the Senior Bowl this week.
Yeah, he's one of my guys in this draft class for those exact reasons. And Bucky Irving was one of my guys in last year's class, and it's that high missed tackles force per attempt average. I don't know if he quite has the contact balance and strength that Bucky Irving did, but you're right. These guys stand out in very similar ways with how they're able to set you up and make you miss. Another guy that I'm excited to see sort of do the same thing, maybe not at the highest level that R.J. Harvey was able to do over the last couple of years, but Devin Neal from Kansas, just such a smart football player, man. They want to get this this guy the ball in his hands in any way, whether it is traditionally out of the backfield as a running back or in wildcat situations. Like, they just wanted the ball in Devin Neal's hands over the last couple of years. 90.5 rushing grade that we've had from Neal, and you can see on the screen there over 1,200 rushing yards, the 16 touchdowns, 46 missed tackles forced in those 37 explosive runs. That is really the calling card of what we love here from Devin Neal. He's somebody who approaches the game in a cerebral fashion, somebody who just knows how to set those defenders up, can see that green grass before it even opens up. I'm a sucker for running backs who are really able to process things very well, because there's a lot of great athletes that play the running back position. In order to really stand out in the NFL, you either have to be a crazy caliber athlete, or you just have to see it better than these other guys do. And I feel like RJ Harvey is one, Devin Neal is another one, but there's so many great running backs that we have in this group in Mobile that who knows, any of them could stand out for a lot of those reasons. So those are two that we are definitely watching. We'd love to hear from you guys as well about who you are watching. At the wide receiver spot, oh man, speaking of deep, speaking of talented, I mean, we could do a whole show just on the wide receivers that we have in Mobile this year. Jalen Noel from Iowa State. You got Jalen Royal from Utah State. Tez Johnson from Oregon. Jaden Higgins from Iowa State as well. Daquan Fenton from Virginia Tech. His teammate Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech as well. Jack Besh from TCU. Ty Felton from Maryland. Pat Bryant II from Illinois. Xavier Restrepo from Miami. Brew McCoy from Tennessee. Really excited. He's not one of my guys, but I am really excited to see him, given his injury history and him being just a top-tier recruit when he was coming out. I mean, what is he going to look like? Can he stand out? I just kind of wanted to shout him out there. Alakai Omaner from Stanford, Arian Smith from Georgia, Kyle Williams from Washington State, Chimere Dike from Florida, and then Jamal Pritchett, from South Alabama is sort of the hometown guy that they're getting in there in Mobile. Who's the guys that you're watching here from the wide receiver position?
So the first one's just one of my favorite players in the country. I've loved watching him the last couple of years. The all-time leading receiver at Miami, as everybody knows, Xavier Restrepo, is arguably he's arguably the best slot receiver, I should say. At least he was in college football, and he might be in this draft. He's a pure slot guy. He's not going to light up the combine and all the testing. You know, he might even be a high 4.4 or 4.5 kind of guy. But you mentioned at the running back spot, there's guys who are freak athletes, and there's guys who just absolutely get it. Xavier Restrepo absolutely gets it when it comes to the nuance of the position, his route running and the way he sets up defenders, the headiness of certain times, just in situational football and game situations, getting in a defender's blind spot and man-to-man coverage and the way he gets out of his breaks. I just love everything about his game. I think he's a ready-made NFL slot receiver. I would take him in the second round tomorrow, honestly, Trev, even without the most elite physical tools. Added a little bit of yards after catch to his game this season that wasn't previously there, and I think just an immediate starter who can step in for the right team in the slot. I even think about a drop-back team like the Cincinnati Bengals or somebody like that. I think he'd be a fantastic fit on a lot of teams, and he's going to be a really productive player. His football IQ is as high as any receiver in this draft. The other guy that I'm really curious on is Jack Besh from TCU, because this was really the first time this year, between 2 years at LSU and 2 years at TCU, that he really got a chance, an expanded opportunity to shine, right? And he did. He had a 1,000-yard season, 83.1 receiving grade is really good. And it's funny because you watch him, even in his time when he wasn't getting a ton of opportunities, I don't know that there's one elite trait that sticks out, but it feels like he's just pretty good B to B plus at everything across the board. He's a solid route runner. He's got terrific hands. He's a tough player, makes contested catches. He's got good instincts after the catch. After a while, I kind of got this, Jacoby Myers feel out of him where it's almost hard to explain why he's good, but he is really good at everything. And I think when I got done watching his tape, he was the one where I went immediately, I was like, okay, I want to see him at the Senior Bowl. I want to see him against the elite competition, not the bottom half of the Big 12, because he got off to a raging hot start this year and then cooled off a little bit. I want to see him one-on-one against a lot of these elite defensive backs that we have in college football and coming into the draft, because I think he's another guy who, by the end of this week, he could be a fifth-round pick. He could be a second-round pick, and it just depends, I think, a lot on how he performs in these matchups, especially in the one-on-ones, but there's enough talent here to work with. He could be a solid receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, you're picking two fan favorites, I think, in Besh and Restrepo, somebody that they're either going to have a lot of fans this draft cycle. Two that I'm going to pick out. My guy that I've been caping for since summer scouting, so I got to keep banging the table for him, Alakai Omaner from Stanford. I mean, he is just a big receiver who wins in the big receiver ways. He's got great contested catch ability, but also he's got a track background to him. So he had a knee injury early on in his college career, so it took him a little bit of time to get confident with that knee and see that track speed again. But not only does he win in contested catch situations and with his strength, he'll also beat you down the field. If you're not honest about it, he'll get even and leaving with you up the sideline. And so he's got a lot of explosive plays too. One of my favorite traits of him is how he run blocks and how he will give his all as a blocker. I don't know how much we'll be able to really see that at the Senior Bowl, but we already know that exists in his tape. He's going to remind me a little bit of a guy who I also liked, who was also from Stanford, who also went to the Senior Bowl, in Michael Wilson, where, okay, these are bigger, stronger, well-built wide receivers. They can block really well. What can they give you in the one-on-ones? Can you get open in that area? When I watched Michael Wilson get open in those one-on-ones, that was what sold me, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be in on this guy. So I feel the same about Elk Iomaner. And then the other one is Jalen Royals from Utah State. And not the biggest dude in the world, but he plays big. Almost 500 receiving yards after contact over the last 2 years. He's got a ton of contested catches himself. He is not quite to this talent level, but his build reminds you of a Jamar Chase. You know how Jamar he wins by almost just being this big-bodied wide receiver, these contested catch situations, and yet he's not the biggest dude in the world. That's how Jalen Royals tries to play. And again, I don't think he's quite as athletic as a Jamar Chase. I don't think he's quite that talented of a wide receiver, but you see similar flashes of how these guys win, especially with that mentality of playing a lot bigger than what their measurables might show you. So I'm excited to see Jalen Royals because I already know the contested catch ability. Can you start cooking some of these guys in the one-on-ones? Where's your separation? Do we consistently see it? Because if we do, I already know I'm ticking both of the strength category boxes for both of these wide receivers that I mentioned. So a lot of wide receivers that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Pat Bryant, sort of another one from Illinois, just to shout him out. We don't have a lot of true X on the line of scrimmage, big-bodied wide receivers in this draft class. Bryant's been one of the more successful ones over the last year, and if he can showcase good release skills versus press, getting some separation against those tight one-on-one coverages in the drills, then you go, man, okay, this is somebody that you feel comfortable playing on the line of scrimmage at the NFL level. So right now I feel like he's a good depth receiver. Maybe he could be more than that if he shows us something in Mobile. Your guys from Iowa State are here as well. Jaden Higgins, Jalen Knoll. You got to be excited about that, getting to see them in person too.
Yeah, those two guys. It was one of the best duos in college football, and I think I'll start with Knoll, kind of in the same mold as Restrepo, maybe a little bit less after the catch ability. I think that's the one thing is Knoll's not really a gadget guy that you'll get screens to, but he's a very, very good route runner, as pure a slot receiver as you can get. I think an alternative to, say, a Restrepo, maybe a round or two later if you still need that type of guy. And Higgins, you mentioned it. There's not many big-bodied X's, but he's one of them also, a terrific possession receiver with fantastic hands, can go up and get the ball at 6'3", 6'4". I think that's another guy you mentioned, just like Pat Bryant, who's going to be, I think, in that third, fourth round conversation, maybe even sneaks into the back end of the second if a team needs a big-body possession receiver like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Exciting wide receiver group for sure. We already know that everybody pulls out the phones and records every single one-on-one rep that there is at the Senior Bowl, but we know we're going to get more of it this year. Moving on to tight end. Elijah Arroyo from Miami, Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, Gavin Bartholomew from Pittsburgh, Mason Taylor from LSU, Molokai Matavato from UCLA, Gunnar Helm from Texas, Jake Brittingstool from Clemson, CJ Dupree from Alabama, and then Harold Fannin Jr., the record breaker from Bowling Green. Who you got on this list that you're looking forward to seeing?
It's got to be Harold Fannin Jr., and I think this is, we talk about, what's at stake for certain guys. I think there's a chance by the end of this week we're calling Harold Fannin Jr. clearly tight end 3. And there's the other chance where we're calling him tight end 8 or 9. He's the wild card in this entire tight end class because he's kind of a weird player. He led all of college football in receiving yards, receivers, tight ends, backs, whoever, in receiving yards this year. That's the all-time single-season tight end record, beating Jay Samaro from Texas A&M back in the day. He makes people miss with the ball in his hands. I think that's the first thing you notice is when he has the ball in his hands, He's like a running back in a tight
He
end's
is.
body.
Yeah.
That's really what he is he makes people miss. He's powerful. He's got a good stiff arm he can go to. He can get vertical down the field. He's got very good speed, and this isn't just MAC level good speed. We saw this guy tear up Penn State and Texas A&M this season. Very good speed, very good after the catch ability. A lot of production that came from screens and some design looks after the catch. I don't think the route diversity is all the way there yet, right? He kind of, you've mentioned this to me before. He kind of runs a little bit funny, especially in and out of cuts, but I think the things that are going to be up for debate here are the route running and how much he's worked on that and how much short area quickness he has, right? And the blocking, right? He's a little bit smaller. He played in the MAC. Now, he did a nice job blocking down there. He's well taught at Bowling Green, but is he going to be able to do that at the NFL level? The things he can do extremely well. I think right now, if I was putting a loose comp on it, there's something like Jonnu Smith, from FIU back in the day and now finally starting for the Dolphins this year. I think that's the easy comp, but Jonnu, I think did he go on day 3 or maybe he went in the 3rd round? I forget what round
I thought he was a 3rd rounder. Let me double check that.
He might have been a 3rd rounder, which Fannin may end up there anyway, but that's kind of the early thought that I have is, okay, he's clearly a guy who's dynamic with the ball in his hands, but can he diversify the route running a little bit? What are we going to see in these one-on-ones from Fannin here? Because again, if he goes out and dominates in that sense, among this tight end group, which he very well could, then he could easily be tight end 3 by the end of the week. He's one of the most fascinating players to watch at any position in the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, pick 100, by the way, Jonnu Smith, right at 100, 3rd round. So, 3rd round pick there. And I think that feels like it's in range. I'm not that measurables are everything, but what does Harold Fannin Jr. show up as? Because I think he's listed 6'3", 230. Is he a little bit bigger than 230? Is he smaller than 6'3"? Like, is he, 6'1.5", 6'2"? And again, not that changes anything in his tape, but it's going to matter for NFL teams. It's going to change how you look at him, because if Harold Fannin Jr. is 6'2" or like a shade under 6'2", I don't know any teams that are legitimately going to think like, yeah, this is a tight end. Like, absolutely. Like, I'm not worried about this. Instead, you look at his tape and you look at all the things that he does well as an athlete and after the catch and all that, and you say, okay, this needs to be more of a gadget player and somebody that you sort of have a plan for. At that point in time, you're almost like manufacturing touches for him like he's Deebo Samuel or something, if his measurables are a little bit different. But if he's more of 6'3", 6'3.5", whatever it is, then I think teams can convince themselves, okay, we're drafting a guy who could potentially maybe be a tight end 1 for us, or just at least a unique offensive weapon. So just the measurables overall, I'm excited to see for him. The guy I'm going to point out is Elijah Arroyo from Miami. And the reason why I'm pointing him out is because I didn't get to his full scouting report until a couple of days ago when I was watching a lot of these Senior Bowl guys, and Arroyo is awesome, man. 6'4", 240, 245 pounds, a lighter tight end, but this dude moves so well. There's a lot of receiving tight ends in this draft. Terrence Ferguson, Gunnar Helm, Colston Loveland, Mason Taylor. Like, there's just a lot of these guys who are more move tight ends than they are really traditional inline tight ends. If I've got a player who I want to draft as a move tight end, give me Elijah Arroyo. 9.1 yards after the catch average this year. It was first in all the FBS for tight ends. Normally, when you're looking at players, if their average depth of target is low, their yards after the catch is going to be high. If their average depth of target is high, their yards after catch is going to be low. That's just normally how it works. Arroyo's high in both. Arroyo had a 74th percentile average depth of target of 11 yards over the last it's just 1 year because he's only got 1 year as a starter, really. And then he was 91st percentile in yards after catch for tight ends. So this dude's doing it all for you. He's a true athlete. He's got such great fluidity to him, great footwork, can flip his hips instantly. Guy who can give you a lot after the catch when it turns to that total athleticism. I thought Gunnar Helm was kind of like the king of yak within this class, especially beyond the top 2 guys of Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren. But shoot, man, I think Elijah Arroyo is that guy now. So what is he like? What's the strength profile like? He's got a really cool background. I mean, he was born in Miami. ended up moving to his family ended up moving over to Mexico, to Cancun, Mexico, when he was 6 years old. But he was able to find a youth football team that he found there and continued to play the game of football. Ends up moving to Frisco, Texas, with his family when he was 12. So he continued to play football there, and then got to play high school football in Texas. Commits back to Miami, a little bit of a full circle moment. So really cool story for Arroyo, who suffered a knee injury as a sophomore and really didn't get to play much as a sophomore or a junior. And then this past year was his first year fully healthy, so it was his only full year as a first-time starter. So there's a reason why you maybe haven't heard of him, but you should. And I certainly think that he's going to be a name to know after the Senior Bowl is done. Getting to the offensive line here, we'll go offensive line in general. What we'll do is we'll do offensive tackles and we'll do interior offensive line. So that's what we'll do next, and we'll go two each from this group here. But before we do that, got to talk to you about the people who are fueling the Health Elite revolution. That's Cherry Bundy. These products are awesome. I've had them myself. They're fantastic. They're great for any sort of active lifestyle, whether you like getting your steps in around the neighborhood or whether you're training for a marathon or CrossFit every single day going hard. These products will allow you to perform your best and recover your best. Natural products, natural ingredients, no added sugar, the tart cherries that they're made with. They've got all sorts of antioxidants. They help reduce soreness, help increase recovery, help support immunity, even helps you get improved sleep with naturally occurring melatonin. They're also professionally tested. When I say that, I mean nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams, every single NFL team, 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl champions, every single team that was playing in Europe or Brazil this past NFL season had Cherry Bunny with them to help with the travel and the recovery and all that good stuff. You got to check it out. They've got all sorts of stuff. It's not just the drink. They have the pouches too. They've got the pre-workout. They've got things to help you sleep. They've got things to help you recover. Check them out. They're available on Amazon, so you can see it all there. You go to cherrybundy.com or local retailer, sometimes like a Publix, a Kroger, wherever you live. Check that out. Sometimes those places have them, but if they don't, you can see all the great products and how they can help your active lifestyle over at cherrybundy.com. That brings us back to offensive line. Here's for previewing the Senior Bowl. I'll go offensive tackles first, and then I'll do interior offensive linemen, and then we'll pick two guys because it's a wide list of those players. A lot of exciting players that we're going to get to watch. Jalen Rivers from Miami, Greg Zabel from North Dakota State, Ariante Ursery from Minnesota, Wyatt Milam from West Virginia, Carson Vincent from Alabama A&M, Ozzie Trapillo from Boston College, Jack Nelson from Wisconsin, Ajanai Cornelius from Oregon, Armand Membu from Missouri, Marcus Mbow from Purdue, Jonas Savanaia from Arizona, Anthony Belton from NC State, Emory Jones from LSU, Caleb Rogers, Texas Tech, Logan Brown from Kansas, Jalen Travis from Iowa State, Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon as well, and then just interior offensive lineman Miles Frazier from LSU, Garrett Dellinger from LSU, Jonah Monheim from USC, Jared Wilson from Georgia, Tate Ratledge from Georgia, Jackson Slater from Sacramento State, Clay Webb from Jacksonville State, and then Jacob Bayer from Arkansas State. Who you got on this list, Dalton? Who are you looking at?
All right, so if we're going offensive tackles first, I'm going to look at two of the bigger names here. One of them is Wyatt Milam from West Virginia, who was the second highest graded offensive tackle in the entire country this year. A ton of experience in a very diverse run scheme and a solid pass protector. And I think the argument is going to be here, is he going to play tackle or is he going to play guard in the league, right? I mean, just been outstanding at left tackle for at least 3, if not 4 years for West Virginia. Asked to do pretty much everything you can imagine in a very diverse run scheme, and he's just excelled in everything. I mean, he's pretty much maxed out what he can be as a college player, and I'm curious to see how he performs and then how he's even used here if we see him both at tackle and at guard. And I think a similar stance here for Emory Jones from LSU. Is he a tackle or is he a guard? I know you've talked about him being a guard. There are times when you can see the full potential of his talent, but there's also inconsistencies to his game. So maybe a move inside to guard would help him as also. And those are the two guys maybe at tackle that we're looking at. They're going into it as tackles, and we'll see if that changes later. And then if I had two inside guys to go with, one of the guys you mentioned there, Clay Webb from Jacksonville State, is a guy I've liked for a long time. I think 3 really good years down there with the Gamecocks, transferred in from Georgia, and just went down to even, I know it's Conference USA, but absolutely dominant. Last 3 seasons, 90.4 overall grade, and allowed 1 sack in each season. A nasty, nasty run blocker. And I think if we're comparing him, say, to a guard like Christian Haynes from UConn last year, Haynes was an athletic zone blocker. This is a downhill, nasty, gap-blocking guard that you can put in. He's going to give you that mean streak up front that adds just the attitude to your run game. So that's one. And then I'm really curious just to see who emerges at center. I don't think we have any premier center prospects.
I got a name. You ready for it?
The one I was going to point out is maybe Jared Wilson from Georgia.
Hell yeah, brother.
That's where I was going with that. Is, he steps in there and big shoes to fill. Stepping in as the starter there in between two really good guards at Georgia, and interior protection was a big thing. But Jared Wilson's the guy that sticks out to me from the Bulldogs. I mean, I don't even know who I could name right now in this class with Parker Brailsford going back to school. I think it was Logan Jones going back to Iowa as well. I don't even know who I could name as the best center in this class right now. It's really kind of up in the air, and I think Jared Wilson is a guy who could emerge from that group.
Yeah, I think you have a lot of, there's so few labeled interior offensive linemen in Mobile that the reason for that is because there's a lot of guys that are listed as tackles, played tackles, but they're probably going to kick inside. Like, I'm just looking at this list now. Greg Zabel from North Dakota State, he played tackle for them. I bet he's a center at the NFL level, and we've seen that before. Let's see. Jonah Savanaia from Arizona. I think he is a guard at the next level. Marcus Mbow played offensive tackle at Purdue. I wonder if he could be a center, genuinely. I think about Will Campbell as well, one of the top offensive linemen in this entire draft class. I think he could play tackle at the NFL level, but I also look at him. I've talked about this fit before, like for the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears have two offensive tackles that they are fine with. If you draft Will Campbell, he can either play a guard spot, or I actually love the idea of him playing in the center of your offensive line. And I think the rest of your offensive line gets exponentially better because he is there. So I think, to your point, there's not a lot of just guys who played center in college who are coming out this year that you feel great about. But I think there's a lot of tackles who, when we talk about kicking them inside, it's not just kicking them inside to guard. Like, think about what Graham Barton did last year, going from left tackle playing at Duke to a center for the Buccaneers. Like, that's the type of transition you could see for a lot of these offensive tackles there. So I'm glad that you pointed that out. But I was also going to shout out Jared Wilson because he is a crazy good athlete at the center position. He's only got 1 year as a starter because he sat behind Cedric Van Pran for 2 years when he was the starter at Georgia. And Cedric said last year, I read this quote, he's like, Jared's better than me. And it was just like, it was kind of funny because it was like, maybe this was after the season. I can't remember exactly when he said this quote, but it could have been after the season was over and, those exit interviews of, who's coming up next or whatever. But he was basically like, I think Jared's better than me. And Jared has a lot of great athleticism to him. So he's a guy that if he can hold up in the strength category, we'll start talking about him potentially as the best center in this class. My two offensive linemen that I'm looking at, Ariante Ursary from Minnesota is one of them. Very intriguing player because he's got the size that you would want, especially right around like 335, 340. I mean, he is a massive human being, and yet the feet fire so quickly. He's got such nimble footwork for a player who is pushing the scale 340. He's got adequate arm length, and I'm not trying to, go against any of the measurables when it comes to him playing offensive tackle or kicking inside. But when I watched his tape, there's a lot of flexibility issues with him. And you can see that sometimes with how hard it is for him to get his butt down in his stance. And I just wonder how he's going to fare against some of these faster edge rushers, because it's a really good edge rush group. We'll get to that in a second. If he really starts struggling with guys getting across his face and really getting to the outside shoulder, or being able to threaten to the outside and then boom, hit an inside move on him, and he can't laterally move the way that he needs to, maybe him playing guard isn't the worst thing in the world because he'll have a little bit more help, and I think he could be a fantastic guard for you. So he's one that I don't think we hear a lot of conversations of him potentially kicking inside, but I wonder that because of a little bit of flexibility issues that I see with him, certainly at his hips, and that goes with putting his butt down and some hamstring flexibility. Sometimes he gets a little bit too over his toes because he's a little bit more of a waist bender, and then he get off balance. And so I wonder if I'm going to see that in person. So I'm going to be on the lookout for that because I know a lot of people like him at offensive tackle in this class, and you should. Elite zone blocker. When you have a player who's that big, who moves that well, I understand it, but there's some nuanced things to look at when he's in Mobile. Ozzie Trapillo is the other one from Boston College. This guy's 6'7", 310, 315 pounds. I mean, he might be a little bit lighter when it comes to going up against strength, but he just approaches the game so well. You see it on the screen, 80.5 pass blocking grade there from him. Not the most imposing run blocker, but almost a net positive run blocking grade, run around 70.0. only 2 sacks allowed, just 17 pressures allowed. He's got the length, he's got the footwork, he's got the technique in his pass sets. I don't think we're talking about this guy enough. I really don't. I think he's just a solid offensive tackle prospect who's going to be able to be a day 2 pick, and he's going to be able to come in and start for an NFL team. Maybe not year 1, but I think this guy's a future NFL starter, and you don't get to say that as confidently as I feels like I'm saying it with Ozzy Trapillo. So I'm looking to see, can he hold up against great strength that we're going to see from the defensive line group in Mobile? If he can, he's a center that I'm going to want in this class.
No, absolutely. I think especially when you talk about Trapillo, they always have well-taught offensive linemen down there at Boston College, and that tradition is just going to continue with Bill O'Brien as their head coach. So I think it's always – there's certain schools we look at, right, Wisconsin and Notre Dame and the offensive line schools where it feels like 1 or 2 guys come out and they're good every year. I think Boston College is quickly becoming one of those places.
I agree. On to the interior defensive line now. We'll pick one guy from this group that we're excited about, although there are plenty that we could choose from. Cameron Jackson from Florida, Joshua Farmer from Florida State, Ainias Peebles from Virginia Tech, Darius Alexander from Toledo, Shamar Turner from Texas A&M, Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, Deion Walker from Kentucky, Yahya Black from Iowa, Jamari Caldwell from Oregon, TJ Sanders from South Carolina, and then Alfred Collins from Texas. Who we watching in this group? Actually, you know what? There's a lot of guys that we want to talk about here. Let's talk about 2. I feel like this group is worthy enough. Let's do 2 here from this one.
All right, I got 2 different types of players for you. One of them, Trev, I absolutely love Alfred Collins from Texas. I'm telling you right now, anywhere from a 0 technique to a 5 technique, he can give you anything you need, especially in run defense. He's one of the best pure run defenders in this class, and I was so amazed with his improvement this year after kind of playing the third fiddle last season behind Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, 2 guys who went inside the top 50 from Texas, and I was worried about this spot. I was like, okay, can Collins take on a full-time role? He absolutely can, and I think his versatility and that 85 run defense grade there, 21 run stops. Is he the best pass rusher in the world? Not necessarily. Texas had other guys for that, and, Collins would be a pocket pusher, but I think the big thing for me is the versatility and his ability to play in almost any technique between the really any technique between the tackles and continue to be a productive run stopper. I think he's an easy 2-down projection, and if he can get better as a pass rusher, then you've got a serious player at the NFL level. But if nothing else, I think he's got a super high floor as a versatile interior piece that can play anywhere from the 0 to 5 technique. And the other one, I'll kind of go the other way with it, with a guy from Virginia Tech and used to be at Duke, who's just one of the most productive pass rushers in college football, and that's Ainias Peebles. I think when you turn on his tape, it's A-plus effort. He's got solid hand usage. I wish he would use it a little bit quicker. I want to see in these one-on-ones how explosive he is off of his first step, because he showed it occasionally in the second half this year. Also a good run defender. I believe that's a career-high run defense grade for him, but just a solid player who I think the one question for me, can you turn those pressures into sacks? And can you win a little bit quicker? Because he wins with a lot of effort, and he wins with good hand usage. There's a good arm over move. There's a good spin move mixed in there once in a while. But I just want to see if he can get a little more explosive and get off his first step a little bit more against this type of competition. Because if he does, I think he's a guy who could rise into the top 100 as opposed to just a guy where you go, okay, he's a high effort guy and he's not going to give me more than a rotational pass rush role. I think there's a lot on the line here for Peebles this week.
2 guys that I want to point out. The first one is Deion Walker from Kentucky. Now, this is somebody who had potential number 1 overall pick hype for him. He's uniquely gifted when it comes to his physical profile, 6'6", 245 pounds. But you look at him and he's built. I mean, he's got super long arms, but he's got small calves and he carries some weight in the middle. But he's kind of a very unique prospect in a lot of ways, even in his build when you get past his measurables. But as you see on the screen there, 75.4 passers grade, 67.7 run defense grade. And for Walker, 51 total pressures in 2023. 29 tackles resulting in a defensive stop in 2023. But if you'll pay attention, I just said 2023, not 2024. This wasn't the step-up year that we wanted it to be for Deion Walker. He did not ascend to that unblockable, unique level that we thought that he could have. And one, I'm very curious to see what his measurables are. How much does he weigh? What is his actual height? The arms look incredibly long. So what's the arm length to him? Really get those solidified measurements. But then also, what is he like in those one-on-ones? Because he was not enough of a one-on-one difference maker at Kentucky this past season. Can he be that? Because right now, I like some of the measurables, but to me, he feels like more of a mid-round pick than anything close to a first-round selection. And we see that in the production. But maybe we'll see a lot more flashes in Mobile. So he's somebody that I think a lot of people are going to have eyes on. One of my guys pretty early on throughout this draft process has been Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee. Sort of this, sawed off, a little bit smaller, three technique defensive tackle, but is explosive as hell, man. I mean, he gets off the ball and straight into you as fast as possible. Ton of speed to power, even in just that first step. You see the pass rush grade there, 81.5 pass rush grade, a little bit lower of a run defense grade, but 30 total pressures, 19.3% pass rush win percentage. Give me this dude as a three technique in an even front in a 4-3 defense, and I think he'll be able to eat. I think his production would have been even better this year if Tennessee wasn't doing the full line shift hockey changes along their defensive line that they did. So his snap count isn't as high as it is compared to some of these other defensive tackles, but even in the little bit that he was able to play, you saw a lot of those efficiency stats are right there. So I think this is going to be a player who can really pop down in Mobile. And I think that he's going to be able to showcase that explosiveness, the violent hands, the fast hands, the ability to stack and shed and push pull very quickly, and then show off that top passers win percentage too. So those are two interior defensive tackles that I'm looking at. I know we didn't technically list him off because the list that I'm looking at has him as an edge player, which sort of is intriguing to me. I wonder what he's going to weigh in at. So maybe they'll have him play as more of a 4-3 edge. But from his tape, what I liked the most on his tape was him at the three technique defensive tackle spot. So I hope he's able to kind of maintain that weight and stay at that spot, because I'm not so sure he'd be as disruptive with the lack of arm length at the edge spot. But that's where I've got those guys. So speaking of edge, let's do edge, and then we'll go two edge rushers here because it's a fun group. Colin Oliver is the first guy on the list here from Oklahoma State, which is very interesting because he was an off-ball linebacker from Oklahoma State, but he's listed here as an edge rusher. The Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, those are great events for seeing these guys play a little bit different positions than maybe what we saw their college programs deploy them at. So Colin Oliver is one. Landon Jackson from Arkansas is the next name. Omar Norman Lott is the third name that we have on this list. David Walker from Central Arkansas, just an incredibly productive player, three-time FCS All-American. So he's definitely going to be somebody to watch. Jordan Birch from Oregon, Ty Robinson from Nebraska, Jaw Joyner from Minnesota, Josiah Stewart from Michigan, Oladeheo from UCLA, Kyle Kennard from South Carolina, Baron Sorrell from Texas, Jarrett Ivey from Ole Miss, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, Princely Uman Mielen from Ole Miss, Mike Green from Marshall, Savion Jones from Texas, Vernon Broughton Savion Jones from LSU, Vernon Broughton from Texas, Terrion Ingram Dawkins from Georgia, and then RJ Oben from Notre Dame. Who are the two you looking at here, Dalton?
So I think the first one I'm going to go with, and there's a ton of guys, I think, off the edge between maybe on the board 20 and 50 right now on the board that I think are also bunched together, and a lot of those names are right there. But I think it's possible that the best pass rusher among all of them is Princely Uman Mielen. 2 great years at Florida. This year transferred to Ole Miss and was great again. 5th best pass rush grade in the country. Tied for the 7th best pass rush grade in the country over the last 3 years. If you want length, this is the guy you go to off the edge. I mean, just long arms that can really bend around the corner, and he's got an array of moves he can use. I think he's a guy who doesn't get talked about enough right now as somebody who could go in the 20s, who could go in the back half of the first round, because I just think when I look at guys in that range like Landon Jackson or even maybe a Jack Sawyer's in that mix as well, I think Uman Mielen is as good, if not a better pass rusher than any of them, right? And I think the question is just not allowing, tackles to get in on his body once they get by the long arms, but he's proven for 3 years he's one of the elite pass rushers in the country. Looking forward to seeing him. And another interesting guy because of the team he was on, and he kind of got some favorable matchups that I'm so curious to see how he can do in this environment, is Josiah Stewart from Michigan. Highest grade, actually, what was it? He was a 91.2 overall grade and a 92.2 pass rush grade, tied for second in the country with Abdul Carter. I mean, Michigan had the best defensive line in the country this year, and it wasn't just because Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. They had good edge players too, and Stewart was the best among them. Highest true pass rush grade in the country this season. I believe it was 93.6. Now, the one question is, One is arm length with him, because you can see he's very compact and he wins with speed a lot. The other one for me is, the way that Michigan structured it with those 4 freaks they had up front, those 3 guys plus Derek Moore off the other edges. He played a super wide 9 technique. A lot, and there was a lot of space for him to pick up his momentum and really win with speed and bend and his rip move, right? I think, can he explode out of his stance from a little bit of a tighter space instead of being in kind of that, in the NFL, when you're that wide in a wide 9, it's usually going to be 3rd and long, and they are true pass rush situations, right? But if he's going to be a 3-down player, I think we got to see in tighter spaces if he can get to that pass rush arsenal a little bit sooner, a little bit quicker. Let's say when he's maybe only 2 feet outside of a tackle or something like that. And if a tackle can't get it, if he can get his hands on him, can he work through that, right? Because I think that's the one thing you're probably going to say about Josiah Stewart: short arms. Right? He wins with speed. He wins with his feet. He's not going to win with a ton of hand usage and any length at all, really. So I think I'm curious to see him in one-on-ones in those tighter spaces. Can he get around those tackles a little bit quicker and away from that wide 9 technique that he's so used to?
Yeah, he's really just not built like a typical edge rusher, but he wins when he's put in those advantageous situations. And so, in a vacuum, if you're looking him outside of team context, you could say, all right, well, Josiah Stewart's probably a lot lower on the list with edge rushers. But if you say to yourself, all right, we're an odd front and we're going to give one of our outside linebackers a wide alignment to be able to just go straight at the quarterback, well, then maybe you're going to find a lot of value in him. And I think that it just really depends on what team he goes to. Princely's very interesting, like talked about there, because of the bend. I think he's got that bend and burst that's maybe the best in the class. And so that you pair that with the arm length, and I think now we're talking about something. And I agree with you. It could be a back end of the first round type of a guy. I really do. So the 2 guys that I want to bring up, different reasons. Donovan Ezeraku is one of them. I love Ezeraku. He's a player that I want on my football team. The speed to power, I'm a little bit worried about. He's not the strongest dude out there. He's right around 240 pounds for an edge rusher, so he's a little bit smaller as well. Not the longest dude in the world, although I think he has longer arms than his height suggests. I believe he's listed right around 6'3", but I think he's got longer arms than the height would indicate, so I think that we're checking the length boxes there with the arm length, but ultimately just doesn't have a lot of strength in his game. But man, he's so smart. He's got a variety of different pass rush moves. He knows how to attack offensive linemen. He had a really successful sophomore season. I believe it was 8.5 sacks, and then he only had 2 sacks as a junior. And in his own words, he was pretty pissed off about it. And he got back in the lab, ended up being one of the most productive edge rushers in the country this past season. Pretty high pass rush win percentage, pretty high pass rush grade. And it's just because he attacks it the right way. So what does his strength look like? Is he going to be somebody who's going to be exposed against some of those stronger offensive linemen when he goes again, when he has those one-on-one opportunities in those drills? Are offensive linemen just going to be able to sit back and just handle him very easily because they're way stronger than him? Or are we going to see a little bit something extra from Donovan Ezeraku? I'm excited to see that. And then the other one, a little bit of a tweener when it comes to position. Jared Ivey. Now, Jared Ivey's numbers are really good from Ole Miss, and he's huge. I mean, he's I think 6'5". I actually got to make sure that I have his numbers correct here. Where would he be? I think he's on my interior defensive line list because I was scouting him a little bit differently. But he is such a big edge presence that 6'5.5", 280 pounds. So like those are huge numbers for an edge rusher that's 88th percentile and 84th percentile. Whether he's a true edge or not, I'm not really sure. I think he's more of like a 3-4 interior defensive lineman who can also play a little bit edge for you, but his numbers are really good, and he had elite pass rushing grade. He had really good run defense grades, and so the question is kind of, does he have the pass rush juice that you want to be able to consistently attack the outside shoulder? I felt like his game was lacking in that area. That's why I said to myself, well, why would I put him in a situation where I have to see more of his weaknesses? I'd rather just put him in a situation where I see much more of his strengths. So in a 3-4 alignment, he gets to play as a 5 technique. He gets to play as a 4-eye. Like, it's just, you're getting a lot of that length, that strength, that body. You're getting the best out of that body type. Whereas, if you want him as a pure edge rusher in a 4-3, he's not really threatening the outside shoulder a lot. So either he's going to win with power or he's probably not going to win at all. So all of that to say, very unique prospect because he's going to check all the boxes with size. He's going to win the off the bus test, if you will. The second he gets off the bus and you look at him, you go, that's an NFL player. We've seen that from Jared Ivey, and we saw the success this past year, but where is his correct fit at the NFL level? I think that is an important conversation to have when it comes to Jared Ivey, whose numbers are pretty good. Before we get on to linebacker, have you guys played Pick Six from DraftKings yet? If not, what are you waiting for? There's only one game left. It's the Super Bowl. As the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. You get better payouts on Pick Six. The whole thing is super easy. You just select two or more players, choose if they will have more or less of a single stat. That's it. Could be rushes, could be rushing yards, could be receptions, receiving yards, passing touchdown, sacks, whatever it is. Just check out all of the players, all of their more or less statistics that they have. And if you think you know how the game is going to go, then you can pick a couple of players and obviously put a Pick Six set down. It's available most states, Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, all that, so many more. DraftKings is making it even easier for first-time users, even if you're late to the party. New Pick Six customers, you play just $5, you get 50 in Pick Six credits. You can win more on Pick Six. Download that DraftKings Pick Six app now. Use the promo code PFF. That's promo code PFF for those new customers to play $5 on your first set, and you get 50 back in Pick Six credits. Only on DraftKings Pick Six. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus, age and eligibility. Restrictions do vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited, one per new customer. Bonuses awarded as non-withdrawable Pick Six credits. They expire within 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos. All right, linebacker. Next position that we have here is we are previewing the 2025 Senior Bowl. Nick Martin from Oklahoma State, Eugene Asante from Auburn, Jeffrey Brassa from Oregon, Demetrius Knight from South Carolina, Jalen McLeod from Auburn, Carson Schweschinger from UCLA, Shamar James from Florida, Smael Monda Jr. from Georgia, Cody Lindenberg from Minnesota, Kareem Reed from Utah, and Jack Kaiser from Notre Dame. These are the guys, man. Like, these are basically the top linebackers that we have in the 2025 NFL draft. This is a great group that we have here. Who is one that you are really looking forward to seeing the most?
I think one who's risen up the boards recently, and I think because a lot of people, and myself included, didn't watch a ton of UCLA during the season. They kind of struggled through the Big Ten schedule. They weren't really in the playoff chase. Carson Schweschinger from UCLA, I think the more I watch him, I think the word is energy. He's fast, and when he pulls the trigger and he knows where he wants to go, he absolutely flies to the football. He's always got his eyes to the ball, and he's got very, very fast feet. I think you have to reel him in just a little bit, and I do even find that 90 pass rush grade interesting because he's got a little juice off the edge even when they put him out there. But you see the potential, and I think what it gives him, the A-plus effort and the solid speed, it gives him a very high floor early on. I don't think he's the number one linebacker in this class. I wouldn't put him up there, in that direction yet. I think he is definitely going to get drafted in the mid-rounds, and I think he's going to have a very high floor because of his speed and his effort. I think he's going to help a team very early on special teams, absolutely. And then I think he's got the best fit as a weak side linebacker in the league, right? Somebody who can run and chase, and you're not forcing him to take on blockers, straight up. I think that's the biggest thing for me is when offensive linemen get his hands on him, there's a little bit of an issue getting off of them, right? I think he's a little bit lighter. He plays with speed, but, these are things I thought I go way back in the day about, say, a Levante David, and he became the best weak side linebacker in the league for a decade. Mm-hmm. So it's certainly a role that every team needs, especially now. You need linebackers who can really chase the football when most teams are only playing two on the field at a time. So I think he's a guy with a lot of potential. I think there's a lot of polish that still needs to go on there, but the A-plus effort and what looks like A-level speed at the position and a very quick trigger, both in the run game and in coverage, I think can help a team a lot. And even if it doesn't help them in the first year or two, I think he's an extremely high floor special teams player as well. I'd expect him to be taken maybe mid to late day 2 or no later than round 4. I wouldn't put him LB1, but he's got a lot of potential with those traits.
Yeah, processing and the processing speed, I think, really stands out. And this is a dude who walked on at UCLA, was basically just a special teams player, redshirt his first year, and then he was just a special teams guy for the next couple of seasons. Actually got the start this year, and man, that time sort of learning and being a special teams player, it's really showing up in the tape. You mentioned 6'2", like 225 pounds. He's really light for a linebacker, but he processes and he flies to the ball, and coaches are going to love that. I'm going to go with a guy who I think could be LB1 in this class, Demetrius Knight from South Carolina. This is another guy who's got an interesting journey. He played as a high school quarterback for all 4 years that he played in high school, ended up committing to Georgia Tech, but as a linebacker at a high school. Played at Georgia Tech for a little bit, but really didn't get on the field much. Transferred over to Charlotte, is able to stand out well in Charlotte, and then this past year he transferred over to South Carolina. He was an absolute beast. I mean, he's got the size that you want for the position. Listed 6'2", 248 pounds, so that's 59th percentile, 81st percentile for the linebacker spot, but he's got longer arms than 6'2" even, so he's got the frame to be able to play linebacker at the NFL level, and his film is just so fun. I mean, he is just the way that he moves at his size is really impressive. So explosive, barely misses any tackles. The all-out play style can sometimes lead to some, over-aggressive pursuits of the ball, but that is fine. I mean, you are okay with that. You're going to live with that for linebackers that you want on your team. He's got the fast hands. He can deconstruct the blocks. He's great as a QB spy. He's great as somebody downhill, but he's also got some good coverage movements too, and he's got some pretty good coverage instincts as well for him, really just playing at the SEC level for only 1 year. So a much older prospect, somebody who's been in college for a while. So he's going to be one of the older prospects that we have in this class. But dude, the tape is so much fun. And when you talk about linebackers that you want on your team, Demetrius Knight is absolutely one of them. The cornerback spot, Brandon Adams from UCF, Tommy Hill from Nebraska, Upton Stout from Western Kentucky, Darian Porter from Iowa State, Jalen Smith from USC, Dorian Strong from Virginia Tech, Quincy Riley from Louisville, Trey Amos from Ole Miss, Jacob Parrish from Kansas State, Bilal Cohn from Western Michigan, Azare Thomas from Florida State, Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky, and then Mac McWilliams from UCF. Who you pointing out in this group here?
I've got Sebastian Castro as a guy that I'm looking at.
Okay, so he's listed technically as the safety, but I mean it's slot corner safety. Yeah, this is fair game for you to say Sebastian Castro. Just for the people who are listening to the show who are like, wait, he didn't say Sebastian Castro. He's listed as a safety.
That's part of the big question. He's listed as a safety in our system. But he was a slot corner at Iowa, and I think the question really is, and this is kind of where I was going anyway with it, is he going to be able to play slot corner, or is he going to move to safety, or are we going to see him with a little bit of both here? Like last year with Cooper DeJean out of Iowa, when there was people talking about moving him to safety, I thought that was nonsense. I was like, no, he's a corner. He's either going to play inside or outside. He's not a safety. I could see Castro making the transition back to safety. The question really is if they're going to give him opportunities even this week to play in the one-on-ones and still prove he can play in man coverage, because I think that's actually the biggest question. He's a really good tackler. He's really good coming downhill. He's got a good idea of that zone scheme that Iowa plays, a lot of quarters that they play down there. He's a curl flat guy a lot. But which is it going to be? Can he show up maybe this week and stay inside and stay as a slot corner and perform well this week? Or are we going to see a move back to safety, and that's where his NFL position will be? So one way or the other, that's kind of what I was looking for, no matter how we're designating him right now. But I think he does get a chance this week with a little bit of both, and that's good. That's the biggest question. Can he play man-to-man? There's no question he can come downhill. He can tackle. He can play in zone coverage. He's very aware. He's just not the athlete that DeJean was last year, really not even close to it, because DeJean was a freak of an athlete, and he didn't get enough credit for it. Castro is a guy who I think is that tweener between, can we play in the slot, can we play at safety, or is it a little bit of a combo role too? I think we've seen teams that have these guys on their team that go, okay, you're a little bit in between. We'll play at safety 70% of the time. When we need you to drop into the slot, you will. And again, I think the fact that he's a really good tackler makes him a good candidate to play either, but that's a guy I'm going to be looking for in that tweener role and see which one is it going to be in the NFL.
I'm looking at Trey Amos because I think that the cornerback from Ole Miss has some chance to make some serious money in Mobile. I really do. You talk about a guy who's got all the length to be able to play outside corner, 6 feet tall, 195 pounds, both above the 50th percentile for the position, but also long arms, like longer arms than even the 6 foot tall frame would indicate. He's got great ball skills with it as well. This is somebody who has forced a ton of incompletions, 10 pass breakups this past season, which was second amongst draft eligible corners in the from the FBS, 85.0 coverage grade, 11th best among FBS corners who are draft eligible this season. This is a man type coverage type of corner who loves to just get his hands up into these throwing windows and get his hands on the football. And coaches absolutely love that. He will have plenty of opportunities to showcase all of those skills in the one-on-ones, in the team drills. I think he's got borderline first-round tape. And I don't think enough people are talking about him in that regard. And I think this week, if he has a great week, we're really going to start solidifying his name into mock drafts. But if not, if he doesn't have the best week, I still think that he will be an early day 2 type of a selection, because you can't teach this type of length and mentality that he has to get his hands on the football. So really intriguing cornerback room here this week. But that's somebody who I'm looking forward to watching. Sort of along the same vein, Darian Porter, another big, long corner. What are the movement skills like? Can he flip the hips? Can he run? Does he get exposed when faster wide receivers are getting across the face? Or can he keep up as an athlete? Because if he can, man, he's another one who, a lot like Reek Woolen. When Reek Woolen went down to the Senior Bowl and he was able to just showcase that length very, very well, he feels like a similar type of player. So those are 2 guys, but really Trey Amos, because I think he's got a shot at the first round with how well he played this past year for Ole Miss, which brings us to our final position. It's the safety position here. Jonas Sanker from Virginia, Caleb Ransaw from Tulane, Maxon Hook from Toledo, Hunter Wohler from Wisconsin, Dante Trader Jr. from Maryland. This is where we had Sebastian Castro listed as well. Billy Bowman Jr. from Oklahoma, Rayon Lane III from Navy, Malik Verdon from Iowa State, Andrew Makuba from Texas, Dan Jackson from Georgia, Justin Barron from Syracuse, Keandre Jackson from Illinois State, and then Trey Rucker from Oklahoma State, who you got in this group, Dalton?
I think among that group, I would go with Andrew Makuba from Texas. Transferred in after 3 years at Clemson and just completely turned around. A big reason that Texas secondary turned it around this year, and they were arguably the best in the country. And I think you just have a guy with a high football IQ, a really good tackler. I believe he had 5 interceptions this season for Texas. And they went through, they ran a lot of complicated zone coverages. I think that's the big thing you could see, is he was kind of the glue that held the whole thing together. Jahdae Barron on the outside, won the Thorpe Award as the best corner in the country. Malik Muhammad on the other side is a really good young player we'll talk about next year. But Makuba on the back end, I thought was really the glue that, he just was fundamentally sound and he prevented big plays. Texas was better than anybody this season at preventing explosive plays down the field. And that's because they got that stability from Makuba this season that they didn't have last year. So I think he improved a lot this year. I think he came into the year as maybe a low day 3 or even an undrafted type of guy. I think he very easily could be a day 2 guy if he continues to show what he can do at safety.
Makuba was so good this year, man. It was so great to see, because I feel like I've been talking about Makuba for 3 years as an NFL draft guy, and injuries and just coming back and not playing as well as he did as a freshman at Clemson. All that went into it, but man, he looked like one of the best players on the field through Texas' run into the college football playoffs. That was a lot of fun. I'm excited to see Jonas Sanker, honestly, because I didn't know a ton about him before the draft process and before he got the Senior Bowl invite. But when I was able to watch his film after I saw him on this list, there is a lot to like. 31 tackles, resulting in a defensive stop that was tied for 7th among draft-eligible FBS safeties. He also had 7 total pressures as well. This is an all-out football player, man. He had the 6 forced incompletions and the 1 interception, but really, I'm looking forward to seeing what he is like in coverage, because I just love the energy, the mentality, how this guy plays with an edge to him. I know what I'm getting as a strong safety there, and I think he could be good in too high situations, as a box safety, as a guy who's coming down, maybe playing a little bit of slot work or overhang work, I should say. But I just love the way that this guy approached the game, not afraid to be physical, built the way that you need to be built to play safety with that type of a mentality. It's just a matter of, do I see some good reps from him in coverage this year? Because the rest is all there for him in his Virginia tape. So really looking forward to seeing him, because I don't think a lot of people know his name, and he hasn't really been a big time standout in college football. You haven't heard a lot of his name in NFL draft circles this year, but I really do feel like he's somebody who could be the talk of the town when it's all said and done. There we go. All the positions up and down of the Senior Bowl. Such an exciting time of year, such an exciting week. We will be boots on the ground, all of us, giving you guys shows, immediate practice updates, podcasts, all that good stuff, covering the Senior Bowl as best as we possibly can. We're going to make sure that you know who's up, who's down, and what it means for the 2025 NFL Draft. For Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you guys so much for watching the PFF NFL show, this Senior Bowl preview edition.